So if you own the 28-70 or you're thinking about purchasing the 28-70 and you're wondering, can a lens that is this big be used as a travel lens, or is it impossible to take something this big on trips? I'm here to tell you that it is possible and it's actually great, and I'm going to explain how you can do it and how you can do it well. Since the beginning of my photography journey, actually even before I was a photographer back in the day, I loved being the photo girl on trips. That has evolved. As I've become a professional photographer, my need for taking my big camera on trips has not gone away. In fact, it's just gotten more and more intense. But I have found, especially after having children, that you really take on a lot when you decide to take a camera like this on a trip versus just taking your iPhone. And so what I found is that you have to determine what kind of travel person you are and what kind of camera owner you are before you can decide whether or not you should be deciding on a lens to take on vacation or not. You may need to be deciding, instead of thinking about which lens to take, you may need to work on, do I even need to take my big camera or should I just take my iPhone? Once you determine that, you can move on to the next stage, which is figuring out which lens is going to be best for me on this next trip. So this is the Katelyn James checklist of deciding whether or not you are a big camera travel person or if you are an iPhone travel person. So the first thing to determine is how much camera anxiety do you have? And this is something that Ty and I talk about all the time because we're very different. For example, when we are leaving the house, we go to the lake a lot, we go on trips, whenever I'm just running out of the house, I'm always taking I have a simple little laptop bag. It's nothing crazy. I think I got it off Amazon. And I will slide my laptop in one of the sleeves, and on the other side, I just put my camera in there. So I don't think about things like anxiety over, do I have a cushioned, specific camera bag just for this camera? Did I pack all that? I don't think about what if it gets messed up? I don't think about what if it gets stolen? I don't ever think about that. And I don't think it's because I'm irresponsible. Maybe I am a little bit, but I think it's because for me, I know that I'm going to enjoy taking this thing and taking great photos of my kids if I'm not freaking out about all the what ifs. I know it's insured. I also know, and this is something to gauge for yourself, that I have a backup at home. If I'm coming back home after a trip to shoot a wedding immediately, but something happens to this on the trip, I'm going to be okay. And so for some people, though, this is what you spent all of your hard-earned money on. You have nothing left in your savings. And if anything happens to this piece of equipment, your business it's not going to be good. So for you, I can understand why you might be a little bit more freaked out. I have a backup camera at home that I could always use at the next wedding or the next shoot that I have after the trip. If you don't have that, then you have every right to be anxious about this very large piece of equipment that you're taking on a trip. I have done this for years. Literally years. I have never taken a special bag just for my camera. I just put it in the bag with my computer because both things are expensive and important, so I'm not going to forget it somewhere. I don't do anything crazy about protecting it. Some people are going to judge me in the comments, and that's totally fine. I can just see it now. I just don't have camera anxiety on trips. If you do have camera anxiety on trips, then what's probably going to happen to you is that you're going to take it thinking, oh, I want to have some great photos, but you are so stressed about it that everywhere you go, you're going to need to have a plan for where's the camera going to be, where's it going to be safe, is it going to get wet, is it going to get sandy, what's going to happen, can it go in the bottom of the stroller, maybe I'll put it in the cooler because it's dry and safe. That is so stressful. Let's just get rid of it. I'll give you a good example. When we go to Disney, I'm not feeling like the whole take your camera thing. Like the castle's beautiful, but I have a whole travel book of photos upstairs with Evie on portrait mode with my iPhone with the castle behind her, and she has her ears on and she's blowing her bubbles, and it's super cute. That was all iPhone. And I cannot tell you how much of a relief it was to park the stroller in that sea of strollers and not worry about this thing. So that is my gauge of camera anxiety. I could feel the anxiety thinking about Disney, thinking about every time we have to go on a ride, them saying, oh, you can't carry this on the ride, me having to leave the line, put it back in the bottom of the stroller, hope that I can get back in time to ride with my family after I just waited 60 minutes for a stupid ride. I don't want that. So I don't take this to Disney, but you've got to decide for you, what is your anxiety level and is it worth it? Okay, so thing number 2 to consider, is taking your nice camera on a trip going to add to your trip or detract from the trip? What I mean by this is when you're going on a trip, sometimes what I've experienced with friends is when they take really nice cameras on a trip and you're in a beautiful setting, it's like they go into work mode and they can't stop shooting and they can't just chill out. They're trying to do portraits on the beach. They're trying to take pictures of everything. They're trying to take detail shots, and they get in this mindset of like, it's like they're shooting for a blog post that doesn't exist yet. And it really starts to take away and detract from their experience. So I feel like once you decide, like, can I go on a trip and take this camera and actually not let it consume me? Like, can I have it in my bag for a great spot? Like, oh, this is a great photo opportunity, take a few photos. But then you put in the bag and you're not constantly living behind the screen while everyone else is walking down a path and talking. Can you make yourself still be very present with the people you're traveling with if you have your camera? And that sounds so simple, like, oh, sure, like I'll just take a few photos. But there are some people that if they brought this all the way out on a trip, they feel like it has to be in their hand 24/7. If you can relinquish that need or that guilt of like, I brought it, I should be shooting, then I think maybe you could take it on a trip and really enjoy yourself and have it there. Now there's an other side to the coin. The other side of the coin is we just recently took a trip to Jackson Hole with friends. It was just like a parents' trip, no kids. It was amazing. If I had not had this camera there, which other friends that came didn't take a camera, if I hadn't had this, I would have been stressed. So I experience it would have detracted from the trip if I hadn't had my camera. So that's another way to think about it. Like it was gorgeous. Like Jenny Lake, like near Jackson Hole, just beautiful. And I've thought to myself before, I can't imagine being there without my real camera. It was so beautiful, actually, that all the other friends that were there were like, will you take a few pictures of us? It was awesome. But I was able to be there and photograph a few friends when the light was good, but I didn't feel like I was consumed and missed out on the conversations and the enjoyment of just being there. I was able to really monitor. Am I freaking out too much about the camera? Am I taking too many photos? I think I'm good. And that has come with time. And if I can take this and capture things and enjoy having my camera, but it doesn't consume me, then I'm going to take it. Is it going to detract from the trip and take away from the people that you're with and stress you out a little bit? You're going to feel consumed by it? Or are you going to feel like it's a little bit of a loss to not have it? And you're going to walk around the whole time thinking, gosh, I wish I had my nice camera. All right, so if you've already decided, I don't have camera anxiety, I can do this, I can take a big camera on a trip and be fine. You've already decided, I don't think it's going to detract from the trip. I actually think taking a big camera will add to my trip. Great. There's one last thing to consider. Last thing to consider is the quality difference between a big camera and your iPhone going to be big enough to justify taking this large piece of equipment on a trip? So this depends on like, what are your goals and what are you trying to shoot? So when I went to, let's say Jackson Hole, I had different goals with photos than I did going to Disney. With Disney, I just wanted to save what it felt like with my kids, but I wasn't trying to create art pieces. Like when I went to Jackson Hole, there are a few shots that we took, portraits and just landscape that I'm like, oh, we could blow this up in our house. Like this is beautiful. I never had that thought when I was at Disney. Disney was literally snapshot iPhone. I just want the kids to remember it. Jackson Hole was, this is gorgeous. Someone could paint this for me. I wanted tight, more highly compressed like portraits. Like I wanted that depth behind Michael and I for some portraits that I couldn't get on portrait mode with an iPhone. So I had different goals on the Jackson Hole trip for photos than I did for the Disney trip. So if you are going on a trip and you really are realizing you're taking a few wide shots of some mountains and it's epic, and maybe you even care more about taking you're going to take some video clips because you care more about a home video than you do high-end portraits, then maybe you just need an iPhone and you can just save yourself a lot of the stress of this by not taking this. So determining what your goals are and the quality goals of the photos, it will help you make that final decision. Should you take your big camera or not? Okay, so now you've decided whether or not you're going to take your big camera on a trip. If you've decided to, you're going to go down that route. Now let's talk about what do you take? So we get a lot of questions, a lot of emails, a lot of DMs about people asking what I would recommend for a travel camera. And most of these questions are coming from professional photographers that cannot allow themselves to consider just taking their iPhone, but they don't want to take this massive camera on a trip. And so they're trying to think of like a really nice point and shoot or like a medium grade travel camera. I hear that, I think to myself, I don't know why you would get a middle of the road camera, because if you have a really great one that you use professionally and then you have your iPhone, let's just choose between the two of them. Because if you take kind of a middle of the road camera that's just for travel, you are still dealing with things like cards and batteries and taking care of it because it's expensive still. Even though it's not this price point, it's still an investment. And you're always going to have your phone anyway, so you have this other piece of equipment with you. So I think in my mind, I don't see the advantage of purchasing a separate, smaller grade camera just for travel when you're a professional photographer and you already have gear that you love. Now, there's exceptions to this. I know there's exceptions to everything. But for me, because I'm not normally the person that's traveling and hiking up Everest, I don't need to worry about having a compact, small camera. I can take a camera this size, put it in my computer bag, and I'm good to go. So I don't really see the advantage of having a slightly smaller camera that's a little less quality than this, but it's bigger than an iPhone. It's like, just take your iPhone. Your iPhone's gonna do great. It's gonna be something you can slide in your pocket. You're gonna have it no matter what. So let's simplify. If you're gonna have a nice camera, why don't we just take our nice camera? All right, so this brings me to the 28-70. And you would think, because it's so heavy and it is so big and bulky, that it would not be a great lens choice for travel. But I disagree with that. I love it for travel, and here's why. When I used to travel with my DSLR back in the day, I remember going to Europe and thinking, okay, I'm gonna want some portraits of us. Like if we go to the lavender fields, if we go somewhere epic, I'm just gonna want that good compression. I'm gonna want a 50mm lens, but I'm also gonna want width, because you're driving on these Italian roads, you wanna get a picture of like the coastline. You can't shoot that with a 50mm. So what I love about this is that I get that portrait look, but I also get the grand width that I love about shooting kind of like landscape shots, or whenever we're driving and I'm in the car, I can roll down the window and get a really great shot of the mountains that we're passing by. You can't do that with a 50mm. It's just not possible. And so I have the versatility with this lens, but I also am only bringing one lens, and I don't feel like I am leaving anything at home that I really am going to wish that I had. So the dilemma of 50mm plus I need some width that I've had for years past before I switched to the R6, that has been fixed because I have a lens that's all in one. So when you think about different lens options and how you're trying to get all the things that I love about this in another lens option, there's really nothing that quite compares. Like you could do the 24-105 4.0. 4.0 though, 4.0 is like, that's the whole reason why I didn't like the 24-70, because I just didn't love the difference between 2.8 to 2.0 with this is night and day. It feels like I'm shooting with a prime with this lens. And so shooting at 4.0 for me, like that, that's not even an option. I don't want that. So the 24-70 2.8, like it's a little bit smaller, it's a little bit less heavy, but like I would never choose that over taking this. It is night and day difference. I've owned like 2 or 3 versions of that lens before in the past, and I always kept buying it thinking like, people say it's great for travel, but I never felt fully satisfied with that lens, but I love this one. So this one is going to trump that lens always. Another option would be the 16-35. Super wide, right? And I'm not a vlogger. I don't need I just don't need that extra width. And if I care about compression, then I don't have that with that lens. Like 35 is, the tightest I can get. That's not my style. So everything that I want, I'm capable of creating with this lens. And I found that out recently when we went on our trip to Jackson Hole, because I took this thinking, I hope I use it. I hope I love it. Oh my gosh, I'm so glad I took it. I set it on rocks for group photos. I let strangers use it to take a group photo. Believe it or not, no one ran away with it. I used it for landscape shots. I did tight portraits. I mean, basically, I used it for everything. And it was enjoyable for me. It was something that I loved. And I got our book printed, 12 by 12, massive. I have had some trips, though, especially with very young kids, where I have found myself thinking, I'm going to let it go. I know I packed it and I brought it, but this is not the trip. I can feel it. It feels stressful to think about bringing this out. I'm just trying to survive. I've had moments like that, and I don't think there's any shame in that. I think that I brought it thinking I had great intentions to take great photos, but then the trip was more stressful than I thought. And so I think being on a trip and being able to say, I know I brought and lugged that big thing all the way out here, but it's okay to let it go and not take photos if it's going to detract from the trip, add anxiety to your days, and not allow you to enjoy yourself. So some people who own this lens, you know how amazing it is, but if you're worried about the weight, like, should I take that? It's so heavy, it's so bulky. I would just say this, like, if this has become a normal part of your shooting routine in like business world or even around your house or like with your kids, or it is not that big of a difference when you're shooting. If you're going on a trip and you take your nice camera, a 1 to 2 pound difference of a lens is not going to determine whether or not you get it out of the bag and actually start shooting with it. If you have it with you, that's not going to deter you from it. It's more of, are you a big camera person on a trip or not? And if you are, then this being a little bit heavier than like a 50mm, a little bulkier, that's not going to make the difference that you think. And so I will take a little extra bulk and a little extra weight to have the versatility. So this is also still less bulky than taking a 50 millimeter and a 35, or a 50 millimeter and then like the 24 to 72.8. Multiple lenses is way more intimidating and stressful for me than just having one decent sized lens that does it all. So if you went through the first 3 questions of this video and you've determined, okay, yes, I want to take my nice camera on a trip. Now that we've gotten to that place and I've shared with you my thoughts about the 28-70, I think there's reason enough to take this lens on a trip despite the heaviness, despite how expensive it is, because the rewards speak for themselves. You can get a lot of versatility, a lot of variety, beautiful images, high quality, and it's worth it to be able to take one lens and have everything you need in a one-stop shop. So I hope that helped. I know this is not normal. Normally we're talking about wedding stuff, portrait stuff, but I wanted to answer this because we actually get a lot of questions, especially in the summertime when people are going on trips deciding, do I take my baby on my trip? I hope this was helpful and it helps you make a decision that's going to be the best fit for you. We have a whole playlist of videos dedicated to the R6 and the 28-70, so make sure you check those out if you want more information about this gear. So if you like this, if you enjoyed this, tune in next week, so you can get more videos, more information for free. I can't wait to connect with you. I will see you next time. Like and subscribe. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.